Now, yesterday I sat down with the Vice President, JD Vance, in Washington, where we covered a number of topics, including the radicalization of the Democratic Party, President Trump's foreign policy, and Operation Arctic Frost. Here's more of that exclusive interview. Take a look.
I mean, if you look at the way, in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination, that these guys were justifying it, making excuses for it. Most of them weren't explicitly endorsing it, but all of them would say, well, Charlie Kirk said some controversial things. And I would say, as his friend, so what? You say some controversial things in the United States of America, and that's what you're focused on after a father of 2 young children is murdered in cold blood in the public? It's horrible. And your attitude should be, when something like that happens, I don't care what you said, I don't care what political disagreements were, that was wrong. Murdering somebody is wrong, full stop, no follow-up, no caveats, no hums and ha's. Just have the moral clarity to actually say murdering people who you disagree with is disgusting and wrong. That's how I think fundamentally you end political violence in this country, is you have leaders on both the left and the right who are willing to condemn it without any exception. Unfortunately, you've got a lot of people on the far left who are not willing to condemn it without exception. Clarity to actually say murdering people who you disagree with is disgusting and wrong. That's how I think fundamentally you end political violence in this country, is you have leaders on both the left and the right who are willing to condemn it without any exception. Unfortunately, you've got a lot of people on the far left who are not willing to condemn it without exception. I also asked Sean, I'm fundamentally an empathetic person. I try to understand where other people are coming from. And when I see people voting for a communist in New York City for mayor, when I see people voting for radicalism all over our country, especially young Americans, the question I'm asking myself is, what happened under the Biden administration to so radicalize young people? What happened under the Biden administration to so radicalize young people? Actually, Charlie Kirk would send it to me. And it was the percentage of Americans who are married and own a home has fallen off a cliff. The percentage of young Americans who are married and own a home. We are trying to rebuild that and fix that by bringing down the cost of housing, by actually making it possible to build a life with somebody, make it more affordable to live a good life with the person that you love. But the reason why I think so many people are radicalized is because the Biden administration was such a disaster, and that's why what we're doing is so important. If you look at the history, if you look at communist revolutions in the past, it always comes from young people, and it always comes from young people who have been radicalized. I think the way to de-radicalize people is to actually give them a better opportunity and a better future and a better path forward. It's why I'm so honored to serve the President of the United States, because that's what he asks us every single day. How do we serve the interests of Americans first? That focus is why I think we're going to rebuild the American dream, and why the far left is not going to win in this country, because they're going to realize there's a better pathway out there. We're charting it every single day.
Well, you know what? Why don't you pick it up from there? Because it's new in a lot of ways. It's new in a lot of ways. It's kind of a combination of ideas, but no forever wars. However, we identify evil where it exists. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have the most powerful military on the face of the earth. Doesn't mean we won't use that military. Taking out Iran's nuclear sites, the ISIS caliphate, et cetera. I think it's the perfect balance. Obviously, some people disagree. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so you hear this term peace through strength, and I would say, if anything, the Trump doctrine, I never talked to the president about this, but I would add something. I would say peace through strength and wisdom. But I would add something. I would say peace through strength and wisdom. And here's what that means to me. First of all, he's focused on peace because he recognizes that conflict is destabilizing. Conflict leads to refugee crisis. Conflict leads to food prices skyrocketing for American citizens. So he's focused on peace. The way to achieve peace is to be the strongest military in the world, to be able to go anywhere you need to, but it's also uniquely wise. And I would always say this when I was in the Senate. What made the president's first-term foreign policy was so successful, and I think the second term too, it's not just the strength part, it's the wisdom part. It's not just the strength part, it's the wisdom part. Because there are so many people, for example, people say, how could he have gone and visited Kim Jong-un in North Korea? Doesn't he know that person's evil? And the President of the United States says, whatever you think about the person, why not sit down and have a conversation and try to understand if there are ways to advance America's interests? I've heard so many people criticize the President of the United States for talking to Vladimir Putin. You don't have to agree with Vladimir Putin's decision to invade Ukraine, but if you want to bring about peace, you've got to be strong. You've also got to talk to people. You've got to engage in that aggressive, engaged diplomacy. And I think the President of the United States, his doctrine is to have the strongest military in the world, to focus on peace, but not to allow the DC press corps to tell you who you're allowed to talk to and how you're allowed to engage in diplomacy. That rejection of that conventional wisdom, that's a critical part of the Trump doctrine, and why I think, foreign policy-wise, I don't think there's been a president in a generation who's even come close. I was born in the era of Reagan. I was 4 years old when Reagan left office. I've never seen a president who's accomplished so much, who's achieved so much peace, who's been able to advance America's economic interests through his foreign policy. People talk about foreign policy, and of course, foreign means not in the United States. But how do you think that we're able to get these trade deals? How do you think that we're able to bring in hundreds of billions of dollars through tariffs? How do you think we're able to bring in $18 trillion into investments? There's a foreign policy element to that, and I really think it's a very unique perspective. But I actually think, even though the Democrats won't ever admit it, that administrations for the next 40 or 50 years are going to be guided by the Trump doctrine in the same way people were guided by the Monroe Doctrine 200 years ago.
I think you're right. Last question. Arctic frost, it is getting bigger, and I talked to sources this morning. It's about to explode. And things that we thought were long lost and gone, I want to be a little cryptic, are not lost.
That's right.
And they're not gone.
That's right. Yeah, I want to be a little cryptic too, because I know that we're it's still in the early stages of this investigation. But look, Sean, I think it's one of the great scandals in American history. I think this is definitionally the Biden administration, the deep state, using the apparatus of justice to go after their political opponents. This is definitionally the Biden administration, the deep state, using
the apparatus of justice to go after their political opponents.
And I also think it raises a very critical issue, and something that I'd encourage my Senate friends on the Republican side to wake up about, because eventually you're going to see prosecutions, not just Arctic frost related, but on a whole host of other issues. Eventually, we need certain subpoenas that have to be issued by a court. Eventually, you need local prosecutors, U.S. attorneys, to go after some of these people in a court of law. If you can't get a U.S. attorney appointed because the Democrat won't give you a blue slip, or you can't get a judge confirmed because the Democrats are gumming up the work of the Senate, Republicans have got to open up their perspective a little bit. And again, I said that some of these people are very dear friends of mine, but why do we allow the blue slip process to prevent the president from appointing a U.S. attorney? Why do we let the blue slip process make it impossible for Donald Trump to appoint a federal judge in California? If you want justice, you've got to empower the President of the United States to actually appoint the officers of justice all over the country. The Democrats are stalling that, and we're going to wake up in a couple of years.
The Democrats are stalling that. And we're going to wake up in a couple of years if we don't have more U.S. attorneys approved, if we don't have more judges approved.
We're going to wake up in a couple of years and realize that we've done a lot of great work at the Trump administration, but justice is not being meted out as it should be.
But justice is not being meted out as it should be
because we don't have the people on the ground. That is a big problem. And I know that that's somewhat unrelated to Arctic frost, but it actually is related to Arctic frost, because you cannot get the justice for the people who are targeted by the Biden administration unless we've got good people, especially in these U.S. attorneys' offices. And that's something, Sean, we got to pay attention to over the next year.
It's sad because the statute of limitations. I make the argument all the time that from the moment he and Melania came down that escalator, they've been out to destroy him and using the very
100%.
heavy arm, deep powers, deep state to do it. And
spying on him, prosecuting him, investigating
senators
congressmen who are just aligned with the President of the United States. You're right. Some of this stuff is going to get covered by statute of limitations. Yeah. Some of this stuff, Sean, some of this stuff we can and we should prosecute. And I'm just telling you, this is going to be a real problem.
Some of this stuff we can and we should prosecute. And I'm just telling you, this is going to be a real problem. It's going to be a real problem. And the people who watch your show are going to get really pissed at Senate Republicans, excuse my language, if we don't have the U.S. attorneys on the ground to actually achieve justice.
People are going to get angry, and rightfully so.
Mr. Vice President, it's been a year. You're going to hate me a year from now. But I want to ask you, what are your future plans? What are your future plans? But at least I didn't have to go there this year. We appreciate all your generous time.
We appreciate all your